Hello everyone. This is a short video just to tell you a little bit about myself, what I do, and how I work. So I'll begin by introducing myself. My name is Alfredo, although my students and my friends call me Freddie. I was born in Cambridge, in England, and that's where I was raised. So I'm a native English speaker. I also speak Spanish, thanks to my parents, who are from Spain. And I moved to Spain to teach English. That's where I first began. Moved to the northwest coast of Spain, region called Galicia, very beautiful region, right up in the northwest corner there. And I was working and teaching in a city um, called La Coruña, or A Coruña in Galician. So that's where I began. Basically, I started teaching in an academy. I was teaching young learners, children, a few adults at that time. So I spent some years working and living in A Coruña, and then I moved to Madrid, and I spent about 15, 16 years teaching in Madrid. In Madrid is where I gained, I would say, my main experience as a teacher, as a tutor there. Just to give a little bit of background, I was basically working at companies. I was doing in-company classes there. Classes were directed towards managerial staff. Some were one-to-one classes. Some were small groups, mid-sized groups, even larger groups as well. I was also doing some telephone classes there with the companies, like backup classes for their presential classes that they had. So this is where I worked for 15 years, gained my experience there as a teacher. Now, a little bit to how I work. I basically, what I do is, first of all, have like an interview, a short interview or a demo class with a student. This helps me to see a little bit what their level is like, what their level of spoken English is like. It's always good to do this, and also to get to know the student, to discover a little bit their needs, where they're using English, what they need English for, any areas of English that they find particularly difficult, where there are some difficulties. This is an opportunity to actually establish then a study plan for that student. So I like to do this in order for me to be able to define a study plan for that particular student. And then we know in which direction we're going, both teacher, tutor, and student. This is a little bit how I work. How do I do this? Once the study plan is established, once we understand where the student wants to go, what the student needs to practice, then, for example, my classes are all conversation based. Okay, primarily conversation, fluency practice. What I do is I send my students an email before the class, and in the email it defines the class planification. The student receives the material that is going to be needed in that class. So this gives the student an opportunity to actually see what the class consists of, become familiar with the material before that class, just so it doesn't come as a surprise. Okay, and the class planification, it defines the class, how the class is divided, the parts it's divided into, what's going to be practiced in the class, and it's generally the lesson flow of the class. This is what I call the class planification. So on receiving this, the student has time to to read it, to become familiar. Should he or she have any doubts regarding any aspects of the class planification, then he or she can contact me via email, and I will clarify those doubts before the class. Send an email and explain the doubts before the actual online class. So this is a little bit how I work. I use lots of different techniques, all depending on the student's needs, what I can detect, where the student is having difficulties. So I have a series of techniques to help the student improve in these areas. But as I said before, my main focus is on communication and fluency. I do correct my students in what I call their tendency mistakes. Now, a tendency mistake is a mistake that is being made by a student again and again and again, several times throughout the conversation. And probably the student's not aware that he or she is making this mistake. So this is a mistake that I always correct. I call them tendency mistakes because they are made more than once, 3 times, 4 times. Now, if students want me to correct their little mistakes, I can also do that. But sometimes I find that it kind of interrupts the fluency of the speaking if I am constantly correcting my student. Okay, but if students wish, I can also do that as well. So this is a little bit how I work. Should you have any doubts or any further questions, then you can always see my profile on the website, okay? And there you will see a little bit more detail regarding my techniques, my teaching techniques, more defined there. You will see them in writing. And it tells you a little bit more about my background and my experience as well. Okay, and finally, just moving on a little bit to my interests, what I do in my free time, what I like. Well, I like reading a lot. This is how I spend my free time. I like to look at topics in depth and discover new things, learn new things. That's why I like reading a lot. I also like nature. I love walking outdoors. I'm fortunate enough to live in a very natural area. I live in Sweden, and I'm very near nature, so it gives me an opportunity to walk out every day in the open air. And this is what I love, to be in contact with nature. And I also like many different topics, from music, philosophy, cinema. Okay, so if there are topics that students like to talk about, well, I'm very open to that, and I really like sending material on those topics for students to actually be able to speak better about the topics that they like. And that's more or less my talk. Okay, I'm coming to the end of my talk now. On a last note, basically, I hope that my services, you find my services useful. I hope I can help you. And I look forward to seeing you soon. And goodbye for now.